Hi everyone. I hope you're doing fine, enjoying Colombia. I'm very sad I cannot be there, but I'm happy to be still part of this symposium. Today I'm presenting on the effects of warming, drought, and disturbances and how they lead to shifts in trade composition. We use a millennial scale approach across the Amazon and Andes. Well, we know that what we consider to be old growth forests are not actually in a steady state. They have, for example, shown decreases in productivity over time, but also some forests show increases in liana abundances or changes in species composition. And these differences and these changes can be caused by many underlying conditions, for example, climate change or human disturbances, but it's rather difficult to disentangle these different effects. And we think we can maybe better do this by taking a functional trait approach, because the functional traits of the species, but also the community mean trait value depends on underlying environmental conditions. So this is just an example of the relationship between community weighted mean wood density and soil pH, but there's also relationships with, for example, climate. So knowing that, we also have hypotheses of how certain traits would change given different underlying drivers. So for example, if resource availability would increase, we would expect that species with low wood density and high adult stature would increase in abundance because those species are relatively drought vulnerable and can grow taller. So various studies have taken such an approach, but they came to different conclusions as to which drivers might be determining the changes that they see in the functional trait composition. Some studies, they suggest it's resource availability increase, whereas others show increases in droughts or human disturbances. And we think maybe part of the differences across studies is caused by the timescales which we generally use that are quite short for the turnover time of tropical forests. And also that studies, they focus on different forest types, so maybe that also has an influence. So given the first aspect, the short time scale, we are here asking the question how millennial scale trait composition is related to climate and disturbances. And we do this by using abundance data from fossil pollen records. So these records, the pollen are usually identified to the genus level. And so for the genera that occur in those records, we look for data on functional traits. And we combine those two sources to calculate the community weighted mean trait values over time. So this is an example where we did so for a site in lowland Peru. And we calculated the community weighted mean seed mass and the changes over the last 7,000 years and related that to changes in fire activity. Now we are also interested in understanding how this depends on elevation. So how do trait changes and the drivers depend on elevation? And we focus on elevation because it's a major environmental gradient in the tropics, and we know that it strongly affects the trait composition. So we do this by using fossil pollen records from 8 lake sediment cores. They're all from forest-dominated landscapes. 4 of those are derived from the lowlands, from the lowland Amazon. 1 of them is a mid-elevation lake and 3 of them are from the highland Andes. Each lake record has at least 2,000 years of history, and for some it goes back to 10,000 years. The lakes have a varying degree of past human disturbance. And in total, across these 8 sites, we have 1,200 samples. And each sample is a point in time, and on average, they're spaced apart by 40 years. So this is a relatively high temporal resolution that allows us to look really into forest dynamics. And the taxon abundances from these records have all been published before. So then we have a list of genera that occur in these 8 lakes, and for those genera we started looking for trait information, and we focused on 4 traits: wood density, leaf area, adult height, and seed mass. Unfortunately, we haven't yet focused on the real ecophysiological traits simply because of corona issues, and we haven't been able to to go out and collect them yet. So we focused on these traits that we could easily find. And we also gathered information on 5 environmental variables, 3 climate variables, precipitation, a proxy for precipitation derived from delta 18O measurements of cave records, temperature anomalies, and El Nino frequency. And then we also have 2 measurements of disturbance. The first one is caused by fire, and we have information from the charcoal from the fossil pollen record, and we have a general measure of disturbance for which we use the abundance of the genus Cecropia. Then we use one model for each of the 4 community-weighted mean traits, in which we test the effect of the 5 environmental variables, so precipitation, temperature, El Nino, fire, and the Cecropia abundance, and also its interaction with the elevation of the site. So the results, firstly the results of the climate effects. So here I'm showing 4 graphs for the 4 traits: adult height, leaf area, seed mass, and wood density. And this is showing the standardized coefficient of the effect of precipitation. So we see that precipitation has a positive and a significant effect on adult height and leaf area, but a non-significant effect on seed mass and wood density. We see the temperature has a negative effect on adult height, seed mass, and wood density, but a positive effect on the leaf area. And El Nino frequency has a negative effect on height. So what this means is then when growing conditions get more favorable, for example, it gets wetter, warmer, and fewer droughts, we see that the height increases, leaf area increase, and wood density and seed mass decrease. So it leads to a more acquisitive trait composition. Second part of the results are on the disturbance effects. We see that fire has no main effect on any of the traits, but the general measure of disturbance, for which we use the Cecropia abundance, has a positive effect on leaf area and a negative effect on the seed mass and wood density. So that indicates that the availability, especially of increased light, leads to a more acquisitive and also disturbance adapted trait composition with species with larger leaves to capture the available light, but also smaller and more seeds to more quickly colonize the disturbed areas, and low density to grow faster in height. Well, some of these effects actually depended on the elevation of the site, so there was an interaction effect. I'm here highlighting some of those results, and the first one is the interaction that elevation had with temperature. So we see that the effect of temperature was positive in the highlands, but negative in the lowlands for the effects of height. So this means probably that in the highlands, if it gets warmer, then a warmer climate means less growth limitation and a longer growing season. Whereas when it gets warmer in the lowlands, then a warmer climate means more water stress, which would favor also especially the shorter trees with a shorter hydraulic path length. And we also saw that there is an interaction between elevation and the effect of fire. So maybe you remember there was no main effect of fire, but we see that the effect of fire on height and seed mass was negative in the highlands and close to 0 or just slightly positive in the lowlands. So the fire mainly affects the highlands and it reduces height, probably because those species have a faster life cycle, or maybe they are able to reproduce after the next fire occurs. And they have smaller seed mass, probably for fast colonization of the burned sites. We see weak effects in the lowlands, maybe because those forests are adapted due to their fire history, although we don't think this is very likely because they're all quite wet areas. Maybe fire effects are happening at a shorter temporal scale than that we are measuring in this case. Or fire effects are spatially very patchy, and at the landscape level you cannot clearly see these effects. To summarize the results, we saw that the temperature is a very strong driver of changes in trait composition, but it means at high elevation that warmer climates lead to more fast-growing taxa that are tall and have soft wood, whereas at low elevation, warmer climates mean that there's more drought-resistant taxa that are short. We also saw that precipitation and a decrease in droughts favor fast-growing and drought-vulnerable taxa that are tall and have large leaves, and that disturbances favor disturbance-adapted taxa that are short and have small seeds. So the take home is that while both climate and disturbances affect the trait composition, we expect in the future that warming increases and maybe human disturbances as well. This could then lead to an increased abundance of the taxa that are small and drought adapted, and at the community or ecosystem level that maybe may reduce the total carbon storage. We also think that other traits might respond more strongly, for example, drought resistance or flammability. And we are still planning to look into this and to measure these traits for part of the genera that occur in our sites. And then we think and we hope that this can help us to further understand the past, the current, but also the future forest responses to environmental changes. Thank you all for your attention, and I am here to answer any of your questions.